Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the Mad Mamluks. I'm Mahin and I'm here with my co-hosts, Sheikh Amir Saeed and Sim. And today we are honored to have none other than Sheikh Omar Suleiman with us, talking about a lot of issues. But Sheikh Omar, first of all, thank you for coming on the show. I know we got a really tight schedule for you, but how's it going?
Good, man. Alhamdulillah. Your weather still sucks in Chicago.
You missed it. It was 73 degrees yesterday. So
I always seem to miss it. I always seem to come the day after.
Right. Yesterday, I think it was compared, but I want to jump right in with you. I was fortunate to be able to go to Hajj with you in 2015, and I remember you telling us how when you were in your teenage years, you had taken a step back with a friend of yours growing up in Louisiana and re-examined Islam and also examined other faith traditions to try to see if that was really the right path for you. And, after reconfirming your faith in Islam, at the age of 20, you're offered an imam position at a major masjid in the United States. And then throughout your 20s, you take on roles such as teaching for Al-Maghrib Institute, launching Muhsin, and recently just founding Yaqeen Institute. In the meantime, you also managed to study the Quran and study with ulama like Dr. Omar al-Ashkar, etc., while being married, having 2 kids, and following the New Orleans Saints, being a fan, And how does that happen? Can you talk to us about your mindset growing up through your teenage years and, how you think you've been able to accomplish what you've been able to accomplish?
Okay, so the first thing, I tell people this all the time, and I'm like, look, especially those of us whose parents had it really rough, so I'm a child of immigrants. I know a lot of people are. Like, my dad went through so much to be able to establish himself here, was the first Palestinian teacher in Medina, 1958, 6 years, went to, went all over Europe to try to figure out his higher education, then ended up in Houston on a bus with some guy, and that guy takes him to U of H. He doesn't speak a word of English, gives him $5. Like, a lot of people have those stories, and he goes on to become, mashallah, one of the most distinguished professors in chemistry in the world. So my dad was this brainiac on the Palestinian issue. He was an activist. So my dad was a professor / activist. He used to always debate the Palestinian cause. Founder of an Islamic school, khatib in the masjid, arbitrator. So he was like this all-around Superman. And then my mom, may Allah have mercy on her, was just the story of personal perseverance and inspiration for me. So she fought through every disease that should have killed her. SubhanAllah, she fought it, and she would recover. And that's why even, when she passed away 10 years ago, it was her 4th stroke, and we thought that she would make it out of it. And SubhanAllah, she passed away. That was the one that took her life. So the incredible story of my parents' perseverance, man, just watching them power through. Both me and so I only have one brother, mashallah, he's a lawyer. So we have a lawyer and imam, and that's it, no sisters. But we were always, I think we both really looked at them for that inspiration. So for me, growing up, as you could tell from my height, and I'm not just making this up, I was actually really good at basketball. So I really, everyone says they want to go to the NBA and that kind of stuff. So I was immediately going in 9th grade, able to make it to JV and then possibly varsity, start playing varsity ball, and I thought I was going to play ball. And I'm just...
Was it actually one of your dreams to go play the NBA?
Yeah. So just like every other Muslim that grew up in the 90s, Hakeem Olajuwon was my hero.
Yeah.
So if you see 34 on any of my email addresses or anything like that, that's because of Hakeem. I just grew up on Hakeem Olajuwon. So yeah, that was definitely a thing. And for me, honestly, it was I was forced to question life at a very early age, because I'd have my mom half the time. I'd have her, she's in the hospital the other half of the time. My dad was, took in Bosnian refugees when Kosovo happened, when, we basically had a new Bosnian family. My dad, mashallah, was very charitable, gave away our car to Somali refugees. My mom would write poetry about Palestine. So we were already connected to a lot of humanitarian causes, seeing the deep racism in the Deep South. So people just assumed I was Creole. I went to an all-black school. So I was literally discriminated against for being black, even though I'm technically not black. So seeing that racism, yeah, absolutely. I had curly hair, and again, there are a lot of racially ambiguous people in Louisiana and New Orleans and stuff like that. So I passed as black. I I've been beaten up by the KKK. I mean, as a kid, in middle school, I've actually been crowded by people from the KKK just walking around a black apartment complex. So not having mom around, because mom's in a coma for 14 days, being in someone else's house, a bunch of refugees around us that my dad is taking care of. Schools, racial issues, all that kind of stuff. My dad both my parents being so vested in the Palestinian cause, I had a lot of questions. So by the time I'm like 10, I'm already debating my parents on like philosophical issues. And I'm not saying I was a smart kid. I'm just saying that I would really, I would ask my parents those really deep aqidah questions, creed questions. Why is this happening? What's the purpose of this? What are we supposed to do? I was already reading into other religions by the time I was 12, at a serious level. So I already taught a Bible. Old. When I was 12, I was already reading in other religions. My best friend, Yusuf, his name was Joshua. Since first grade, we were best friends. Big guy like me. He was football, I was basketball. So he was he's like a lot bigger than I am, in terms of muscle and just he could play football. And but we were the two overgrown kids. Every year we were always the kids that looked 5 years older than everybody else in our class, and we were best friends. And his uncle's a pastor, so he's from a Christian family. So we decide, I was 13, not even 14, 13, 12, 13 going. We were like, you know what, let's choose a religion together. So we don't really know which religion's true, but we're just going to really read religion. And I'm at that point in Baton Rouge. I played basketball in Jimmy Swaggart's basketball courts every weekend. My dad and father-in-law, who's now my father-in-law.
Jimmy Swaggart was that big
Swaggart.
Baptist preacher from the 80s that got...
Yeah. They were part of the organizing of the Ahmadidat, rahimahullah, and Swaggart debate. My father-in-law was part of the MSA and LSU. Yeah. My dad was there as a professor at that point, or doing a PhD finishing his PhD at that point, and they were organizing that. So there's a lot of history there in terms of Christian versus Muslim, and it's the Deep South, right? So we started questioning things, and we started reading things. And it wasn't like he was a Christian trying to make me Muslim, or I was a Muslim trying to make him Christian. It's like we trusted each other that much, and we were brothers. We're like, hey, we're just going to figure this out together. My parents had no clue. My mom, and I'll just recommend, if you just search online, I have a lecture I did on my mom. May Allah have mercy on her, just her history. It's a crazy religious journey herself that she went through to really arrive at where she arrived at. Going from hardcore secular, to being raised in the Holy Sepulchre in Bethlehem, to becoming the most devout Muslim I've ever met in my life, including my mashayikh, by the way. My mom was the most abida, the most worshipping of them all. They had no clue that I was doing this. And subhanAllah, we read, we went to churches, we went to synagogues, we questioned. We're these 13-year-olds who were walking in, and we both looked 18 when we were 13. And I'm not making that up. I had full facial hair, so did he. And I was 6'2" when I was 13. So we looked like we were 17, 18 years old, and we're questioning. And then we both arrived at the Quran, and we're like, there's this, this really resonates with us. So we both decided basically to revert together. Joshua becomes Yusuf, faces a whole world of problems with his house. My dad takes him in, calls him his son, in the sense in a symbolic way. Yusuf calls my dad, till today, he calls him Pops.
Did he actually live with you guys in your house?
I mean, he would come pretty much. Yeah. Pretty much. All right. And so my dad is still to him. I mean, he would say this. My dad is Pops to him. He's probably we joke about this. My dad jokes about me and my brother all the time that Yusuf's the best son of you all, because Yusuf still lives in Baton Rouge, goes and cuts the grass with my dad, helps him out with everything and that kind of stuff. Is a great son to him. So you got now, me and Yusuf are brothers. We tell everyone we're brothers. It works because I'm racially ambiguous too, and Yusuf is black, so we were we just tell everyone we're brothers. Walking into the masjid, my dad's like, yeah, it's my son, and subhanAllah, it was just, and to me it really made me admire my dad more, the way he accepted Yusuf into the house. My mom loved him, the way that, and Yusuf's not like this lost kid. Yusuf is he's just a really great guy, and the way they love him and the way Yusuf loved them. And then subhanAllah, one by one, Yusuf's family, who initially completely rejected everything, one by one, shahada after shahada after shahada after shahada, mom, grandma, aunt, cousins. SubhanAllah, he had an aunt that held out, and she was, so we're talking 13, 14 years later, she's in hospice about to die from cancer, and she took Shahada like the day before she died. So going between that, that was it. And then me and Yusuf get together. We study Deen together. I skip a couple of grades of high school. All right. So I headed to the Emirat, to the UAE, studied Sharia, finished a 4-year program in 3 years, came back, enrolled in an accounting program at UNO. And by that time I was only 18. So I'd finished my Sharia, and I finished IGCSE, British IGCSE and stuff. And,
so from age 14 to 18, you were overseas?
Pretty much, yeah.
I see.
The latter part of being 14.
Okay.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. So I was just really motivated, supportive parents. I was in love with them. I mean, I admire my dad's my hero, man. He's 74, mashallah.
We gotta get him on a podcast. So you're talking about him like
he has a history.
I was
my
like,
dad
we
has
need
letters
to...
from some of the premier early scholars. I mean, that wrote him letters when he was in the U.S. Like Sheikh Muhammad Amin al-Shanqiti, Sheikh Abdullah al-Maymani, like some of the major imams and stuff like that. And if you see him, he's a chemistry professor at Southern University, mashallah. He's tenured. He's 74 and refusing to retire. And if he's listening to this show, you need to move to Dallas, Pops. So.
Man, like, I just see a legacy of Ihsan here.
Yeah.
That's what I'm, like, just hearing, like, from your mother, your father, now to you and whatnot. I remember, I've never heard of you. In 2009, you came to speak at the prayer center of Orland Park. And back then I was like all about like, okay, what guy is this guy, a Sufi, a Salafi? You had like a nice sugar, like a jubba on, and you had your shukr hat.
You were gauging as soon as you heard about him.
No, I mean,
you had to label something.
I used to live in Orland Park. I lived 5 minutes from the masjid. It was there like Saturday, like some kind of like weekend program. I pop in, like family night. I'm like, this dude speaks pretty well, but like, yeah, he's like, I can't.
He ain't on the manhaj.
There's something like, yeah. He's like quoting Imam al-Ghazali a lot, so I don't know. But plus, you got the look.
You couldn't put your finger on it.
Right. And then I remember you...
Then Al-Maghrib hired me. Al-Maghrib hired everybody.
Yeah, that happened. And then, and then we met for lunch. You came to Chicago. Ali Fiaz, who used to be the Amir then, and that was an ops guy for you working with Yaqeen. He's like, hey, man, I need some guys that like welcome Sheikh Omar, because I think you were involved with the YM back then. The YM guys know you, right?
Yeah.
And then I think that was like 2013, and you taught a class in Chicago. But then I've almost seen you, like, it's almost like interesting because, and I don't know what your vantage point is, but like some of like Sim, Sheikh Amr, and I were all older than you. So I remember like going back 10, 12 years, like who was in the dawah? Like it was Imam Siraj Wahaj. Imam Suhaib was around back then.
Yeah.
Yasser Qadi just got back from Medina. And then you just pop up out of nowhere, and then this like you become one of like probably one of the most top 5 as far as well known scholars or imams in America. Like from your vantage point, like how, like what's going through your head as you see that? Because we're in the celebrity imam culture, and how do you stay grounded?
And not only, I want to add on to that. Did it seem like everything was happening really fast for you, or is that just because sometimes people, they're overwhelmed with all of this. They're like, whoa, this is happening too fast.
Look, I mean, for me, it's first of all, I appreciate making your top 5. But I think the rankings are always going to be biased and flawed. So everyone's got a vantage point. So look, I mean, I'll be very honest. When I studied Sharia, I didn't envision becoming an imam. I just wanted to do it for my own self. I actually thought I'd be a pharmacist or something like that, because I was like, okay, I'll be a pharmacist and I'll be able to. And I'd almost finished memorizing the Quran at that point. And I was like, okay, I'll just be able to like be the guy that just kind of works really active and has some sort of ilm to work a little bit, but I'll choose a job that I can do financially well with and just kind of chill, which is why I ended up doing accounting, but I never actually did any taxes or actually know how to work with my accounting anymore. Then I did a master's in Islamic finance to feel better about that accounting degree. But look, in full honesty, for me, I just put my head down, let things come as they come. If I don't know how I'm where I am, I'm not talking about in terms of success. I'm just talking about in terms of positioning. If you asked me 5 years ago, where would I be? Like, what would I be doing? I think long term, but at the same time, I just try to work with what's in front of me at the moment. So I've always, and I thank my parents for that. The humanitarian element of Islam was always what drew me to it. I loved, and I met some of the most righteous people in the world that were devout Muslims, and I loved that Islam generated that in them. We're in the age of celebrity da'wah. It's not a good one. I'm not fond of it, and it might sound ironic coming from me because I am quote unquote a celebrity imam. We have a major issue in our community of not being able to recognize scholars from activists, from quite frankly televangelists and YouTube stars and stuff. Like, we really have a major problem with that. So I think people need to be credentialed in their Islamic studies, and then also people, look, not everyone can be everything. But everyone should be themselves. And for me, like, I remember, and I have a vivid memory, and I might post a picture of this. I've been debating it, but it's funny because when I was in Sharjah in 2002, when the Iraq war happened, I wanted to go protest, and some of my mashayikh were like, no, and I was like, I'm going to protest. And I didn't go with my thobe because I knew I'd look awkward. I wore a Rockaware shirt. And it's still, there's a newspaper clipping of it, Sharjah University students protest Iraq war, and I'm like on there, and you can recognize me, but it looks different. And SubhanAllah, one of my teachers, probably my favorite teacher, of course, after my father-in-law, I have to say that now, who's also one of my mashayikh. When I went to him, he said, look, do you feel like it's justified in the Quran and the Sunnah to do this? I said, yes. He said, what are your nusus? What are your dala'il? So what are your evidences? And we talked about it. He said, okay, and what's the benefit? He said, think about it through an Islamic lens. What are you going to get from this? Why do you need to be there? And so we talked about it, and he said, look, you be yourself. This is you. If he said there's no way, and he had a line, man, and I never forgot that line, and it reminded me of a quote from Abu Bakr, which if I get a chance I'll share. He said that if you were not a religious person, you would have felt compelled to go and stand out there and protest that invasion, which is very dangerous in the Khalij to do. In the Gulf, that's not a safe thing to do with those governments. He said if you were not a Muslim, or if you were not religious, you would have felt compelled to do that. Yeah. He goes, so is Islam going to stop you from speaking out against dhulm? He said that it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense that your deen would hinder you from speaking out against such a manifest injustice. So he said, go, do your thing, be yourself. And subhanAllah, that to me always resonated with me. And the quote from Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was seen serving some elderly people after he became Khalifa, and like holding bags over his shoulders. And they told him, you're Amir al-Mu'mineen, you're the Khalifa now. You don't have to do this anymore. He said, I don't want there to be any good that I used to do, or it's not appropriate that there's a good that I used to do before being Khalifa that I stopped doing because of Khilafah. That doesn't make sense. So for me, it's like, just be yourself and make sure that there is an Islamic paradigm to it, that there is a deen, that the deen supports what you do. Not everyone is going to be a skull activist. That's a word now, apparently, skull activist. And mix the two together. Not every, and I don't blame anyone. If someone's an intellectual that stays in their libraries, that's fine, as long as they're not condescending towards those that are doing the grassroots work. I actually have an appreciation for those people. Some people that's their role. They play it. If you're someone who's in the streets and you're a grassroots worker and you know your bounds in terms of knowledge and ilm, and you have mentorship, alhamdulillah, that's good.
Yeah, not everyone can do that.
Not everyone can do that. The problem is when we start acting like we're something we're not. And sometimes it's the community's fault, and sometimes it's our fault. Yeah. And sometimes it's both together. So we need to do a better job of just distinguishing between scholars, students of knowledge, activists, not in a degrading way, but I need to understand that as I'm navigating those waters. And for anyone that's finding their path, all I would say is just keep asking Allah for guidance. Keep asking Allah for guidance every single time. Keep asking Allah for guidance, and keep asking people for mentorship and shura and advice, so that you can make sure that you're on the right way.
You're someone who projects trends in the community, the way Muslims are going to be in 15, 20 years from now. A lot of our listeners, before this podcast, we took a poll from them, and they want to know, what are the needs of the community in the West, particularly in the United States and UK? What should Muslims strive towards? What areas of service should they work towards in academia or in community service?
All right, I'll try to summarize it.
Yeah.
In politics, we should be anti-oppression. Not Democrats, not leftists, not Republicans, not right-wingers. Our political mantra should be anti-oppression. We are people who stand against injustice wherever it may be. كُونُوا قَوَّامِينَ لِلَّهِ شُهَدَاءَ بِالْقِسْطِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that you are witnesses to Allah and witnesses of justice. The Muslim community should be known as being the justice community, the community.
Not a part of any group, but wherever there's injustice, they're there.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Whatever that injustice is, you are a people that will stand up to those injustices, to that discrimination, even if it's economic, if it's in health. I mean, we need to own that. That should be our space. We need to not just be involved, we need to be leading it. But before we can lead it, we need to get involved.
I love it. Yeah.
So I'm not for, I don't buy into partisan politics. You might see my stuff and be like, oh, well, he's a leftist. I vibe with anybody that's standing up to oppression, and sometimes I'll vibe with some people on issues that I want, that other issues I want. But that's our political.
It's amazing you
outlook.
mentioned
And
that.
that's a truth factor you're talking about.
Yeah, one of the themes that in our podcast that we've been talking to people about is remove yourself from the idea of being a part of a team and go after the central themes of Islam: truth and justice. Even before Iblis rejected Adam.
Mm-hmm.
Because of what? Because he refused to recognize the truth, right? And this is what we've been trying to talk to people about and say, hey, let's remove ourselves from all these biases and our confirmation biases and echo chambers and whatnot, and let's try to look at things for what they really are. And it's interesting you mentioned that. But on the community level, a lot of Muslims are saying they're frustrated with the boards at their mosques not cooperating with each other. There's also frustrations with organizations not willing to work with other organizations within their own country or within their own state. Muslims aren't refusing to cooperate with each other.
Yeah.
How do we move forward?
So, look, we're usually divisiveness is a luxury that we just can't afford right now. And unfortunately, we've been able to afford it in our complacency and our comfort because we have not felt the heat of Islamophobia that we're feeling right now. So when we're comfortable, we can fight with each other and bicker over these things. When we feel like we're in trouble, then that allows us to bond with one another. And that's one of the blessings of calamity. The Prophet ﷺ made dua for three things for this ummah. One, that they would not be defeated by an external enemy. They wouldn't be wiped out. Another, that they would not die due to a plague or a famine. And then the third one, the Prophet ﷺ said, أَلَّا يَجْعَلَ بَأْسَهُمْ بَيْنَهُمْ, that Allah does not put their misfortune due to internal division. And the Prophet ﷺ said Allah did not answer the third one. Allah gave him the first two, but not the third one.
SubhanAllah.
So we are our own undoing. We are our own misfortune. Change comes as a result of a committed, strong, united minority, small group of people, not a transformed majority. That's true in any movement. That's true in any trend in society. So unless we come together and figure this out and put aside these differences, we're not going to get anywhere. And I'll tell you this, Mahin, you mentioned this, and by the way, I heard this a lot, and it's intentional. You know, like, is he Salafi? Is he Sufi? Is he this? Is he that? I'm Muslim. I am Muslim. Like, you want to decipher my Aqidah? You can decipher it through my views. I'll teach creed. You can find me talking about creed.
Sure.
All right. My creed is the creed of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, right? I mean, I'm not, and I'm not going to allow myself to be boxed into a group, because once you allow yourself to be boxed into a group, you handicap yourself intellectually, spiritually, emotionally. You handicap yourself.
Yeah.
You're not able to think anymore for yourself.
Yeah.
You're not able to work properly, and that's a luxury that we just can't afford right now. The Muslims in South Africa, and I'll give you this example because when the pains of apartheid were breathing down their neck, they felt compelled to unite. As soon as they got comfortable, they went into their boxes again and started, throwing stuff at each other. So here's the solution to that: control what you can, what's in your capacity. The Prophet ﷺ said, if you can't do anything else, لِيُمْسِكَ أَذَاهُ عَنِ النَّاسِ, then make sure that you're not a source of harm to the people. I can't solve Chicago's Masjid board problem. I can't solve the U.S.'s board masjid problem, or organizations acting like children sometimes and bickering over small issues, or personality cults. People are sheep for the most part, and so sheep will be led by wolves many times. People don't, this is many people, and the Prophet ﷺ, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rather, he mentions this to us in the Quran, that most people are from the jumhur, not the mala. They're from the people, they're not from the leaders. Most people are led. Yeah. So people will, I can't solve all of this. But what I can do in my own capacity is I can be an example of unity. I can unify what I have the power to unify. I can make sure that I'm not an agent of division. I can make sure that I'm not a poisonous impact on my masjid. I can make sure that I'm not tolerating division in my circles, in my capacity, that I'm not silent about injustice. I can solve what's in my capacity. And that's all that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will ask me about. And hopefully, when we do good in our capacity, it can be a model for other masajid, other communities as well. Yeah. Put the pressure on everyone else to get it right. You get it right in your own small capacity, and then put the pressure on other people to get it right too.
How do you feel when you see some of the comments in your Facebook posts? I mean, I saw one where it was right after you had given a talk after the Dallas-Fort Worth shooting, and it's coincidentally you had actually taken shelter in the same hotel that I got married in.
No way.
At it, he says, that's the hotel we got married. I'm motioning to my wife and telling her, but a lot of people took issue to you sharing the stage with like a person like George W. Bush, started this all to begin with, and what was your thoughts reading that? I know.
So here's the thing. So I'm not just saying this. I don't read my comments.
Yeah.
The vast majority of times, like I'd say 95% of the time, I don't read comments. The times I do read comments usually are when I post something that I know could lead to some Muslims saying some really derogatory things about non-Muslims, or if I post something Palestine, about Palestine, BDS or whatever it is, and I know that someone's going to say something anti-Jewish or anti-Semitic, so I just watch the comments so I could delete those comments. But usually I don't find out about stuff on social media unless someone tells me about it. So someone's like, man, you're getting killed in the comments. I'm like, really? Or, did you see this tweet? Like, I don't see that stuff until someone tells me that it's happening. But, look, after the Dallas shootings, if anybody... Here's the deal with that whole thing. Like, if you're talking about the shootings, number one, I was at the protest. I was at the demonstration. Right. I was in I didn't do the shooting, but I saw the shooting. I witnessed that. I was a part of that entire thing. Dallas is alhamdulillah is my home. I'm deeply engaged at a local level in Dallas. This was not me going to something that was with the presidents. This was our stage. That vigil was going to happen with or without the presidents. And when I accepted for it to happen, when I accepted to be a part of it, I didn't even know who else was going to be there.
Of course.
I just knew it was going to be a City of Dallas function.
Majority of the time, people don't know who's going to be there.
Right. So yeah. It's a City of Dallas function. So then I find out the night before, literally the night before. And I spent the whole night. I know I had 2 minutes. All right. And may Allah help us if this podcast goes out. Okay. But I had 2 minutes. Once they said, we need your remarks submitted in advance. I refused to submit my remarks in advance.
SubhanAllah.
I told them, I'm still working on it. Then the morning came. They texted me. I just didn't answer the text. I showed up in the morning. I said, sorry, guys, I didn't get a chance to send them in.
Mashallah.
So,
what a boss.
So I didn't,
no, that's a lot of respect,
I actually
brother.
went, so they didn't know what I was going to say. And my supplication, my prayer,
yes.
I had to craft my remarks in a way, my prayer in a way that they would also deliver a message.
Of course.
And I think that they got the message.
Yeah. They got the message.
I heard quite a bit.
And I was going to mention about that, because that was, a lot of people didn't understand the effect
granted,
that was
George Bush was drunk. I'm just letting you guys know. That dude was drunk out of his mind, man.
Of course.
Oh, that wasn't an accident.
I don't know if he remember. Probably went back and watched the remarks.
But the effect that had on some people, like for myself, you said something after that 2-minute session that you had, maybe been a few days later, that I'm never going to forget, because it sat with me very well. It resonated with me very well. You said that it may have been uncomfortable for me. And you have to put yourself in an uncomfortable situation sometimes to grow. Something to that extent. Which means that, number one, I'm glad that we know this now, that there's even more respect, that you didn't turn in any comments. You were just going to be there, and they would have to accept what you're going to have to say. That a lot of times people don't really let that happen, right? So alhamdulillah, that's from Allah. Allah allowed that to happen.
There's a second part to that, by the way, not to cut you off.
No, please cut me off. I want to hear this.
This kind of goes to what I always tell people: all politics is local, man. You've got to be involved in your city.
Yeah,
be a part of your city. You're in Chicago. You need to be all about Chicago, and not just in the sports teams. You need to be about people. People in Chicago need to know that you love and care about your city. You own your city. Federal politics, national politics, international politics, that stuff that's a huge monster, and you will have very little impact on that unless you establish a solid presence locally, and you work, and you're someone who develops relationships and makes connections. I'm gonna not mention names here of parties, but this is I was. Let me just say that when the program was planned, when it was determined the presidents would be there, they were asked to provide another speaker, another imam. And from the mayor's office, it was turned down to replace me with another imam. So I didn't know about all of this until afterwards, right? So, look, there's a lot of barakah that came from that. And look, I'm not going to lie. I'm sitting on stage there, and I'm like, how the heck is this happening? Like, seriously, like. But and one thing people don't know, and you heard it first on the Mad Mamluks, is I almost accidentally headbutted Michelle Obama. So she was getting up, I was going down. My head almost hit her head, and like I'm sitting there thinking, like, if that would have happened, I would have got sniped on stage. What a miserable way to go. The other thing that happened is that if you go back and watch the video, I did not clap one time when George Bush spoke, and I thought that would be the headline. Because there are people in the front.
So this is all well thought out. You're thinking about all this. You're not just some guy who goes up there, and I don't mean to say in a disrespectful way, go up there and just, represent Muslims and yay, I did that. You have a plan, a good plan, a healthy plan to do something to show your principles. And hopefully that's what would get the attention, right?
Yeah, and look, I'll say this. A lot of people, and this is a problem, there are a lot of Muslims that are working in these spaces, that have been working in these spaces, and the entire community just writes them all off. The White House of Thought thing, I had my views on people going there for a photo op, or people going there to get a selfie with the president, or to fawn over Obama, despite Gaza, despite all the drones, and despite all the war crimes that he was committing as well. I don't have an issue with someone going there and using those forums to raise our concerns directly to the president, or raise our concerns to people there. And I made that very clear. We do ourselves a disservice as a community when we throw everyone into the same bucket and we say, all of these Muslims in DC, all of these Muslims. And I've never been, to be clear, I've never been to a White House iftar. I've never been in the White House. But I'm saying that this, we do ourselves a great disservice when we put them all in one bucket and say they're all out there just to be opportunists and to get their selfies. There are a lot of great people that have done some good work for our community with no appreciation from the community, that have worked in government and outside of government.
And how's that like? I mean, traditional Islamic studies, you're working with the community, and then you get kind of thrown into politics. Did you know that you were getting thrown into politics? Did it happen involuntarily? Like, were you asked, or?
Look, I do stuff in Dallas. I don't look for that stuff. That whole episode was so crazy because, to be quite honest with you, look, man, it's traumatizing when you're running away and you're seeing gunshots and people falling around you. Like, that was a very traumatic incident, right? And so I was still trying to process the shooting because, I realized, subhanAllah, like what, the truck plowing through the crowds in Nice in France happened like 2 days after that. I saw that on TV and I started sweating because I saw the crowds running away from the truck, and it reminded me of my own personal experience. So it's a traumatic event, and we didn't know the cops were getting shot. We thought we were getting shot at, right? This whole time we thought we just see bullets flying everywhere and we see people falling and we're running for our lives. So that whole thing was so difficult to process, like what just happened here. And it was all surreal, and in that phase, you just kind of have to numb yourself out. One moment you're at this gathering, you're at this function, you're at this ceremony, you're at this function, you're at this ceremony. Then I'm sitting on stage and behind Bush, Obama, their wives, and Joe Biden and Jill Biden and Pelosi, and I'm like, what is going on here? Like, what is this? And a lot of people ask me, were you nervous? I wasn't nervous because I was numb. And it's a blessing from Allah. I actually was not nervous. That's why my voice didn't shake. I didn't sweat.
I noticed that
I was numb. I was completely numb to the experience. Then at like midnight, I was like, whoa, what just happened? Where was I? What happened here? You know, subhanAllah. So it hit me after, because in those 4 days, everything was just a numbing experience. Like, you didn't really know what was happening, and then it hits you afterwards.
Everything happens for a reason, man.
As we wrap up, just a couple takeaways, I think, is like, number one, you're saying get involved in your local government, right? And then secondly,
local community.
Exactly. That's an important distinction, because look, you've got to be there for other communities, and Muslims need to learn to start showing up for other people without speaking. We are so accustomed to always having to be part of the cause, or having to be spokespersons of the cause. If you get invited to go to something that's to protest police brutality, either at an organizing level or at a demonstration level, go there and show your support, and don't say a word. Take a massive Muslims,
awesome
be there.
Yeah.
We are so used to this. That Black Lives Matter protest, which, by the way, on July 7th, that ended up in that shooting, unfortunate shooting of the police officers. And that was planned before the protest anyway, and it was after the protest had already ended. SubhanAllah, I have never seen that much emotion in a demonstration. Mothers against police brutality, people who lost their children to police brutality. Just everything happening with Alton Sterling, with Castile, with all of these injustices. I didn't speak that day. I didn't want to speak that day. In fact, I was just there. And subhanAllah, I invited many people, and this is not to shame anyone else, so I'm not even going to say what they were, what position. But when I invited anyone who had a public presence, they said, okay, well, what time are we speaking? And I said, no, you're not getting it. You're not speaking. That's the point. And I had a heated argument with a few people before that protest. Now, I'm glad they didn't come, because now it ended up in a shooting. I would have felt guilty if they came there and you see them running away, but that's the problem. We're so accustomed to, all right, well, what am I speaking? What am I saying? What's Muslim about this? It doesn't have to be Muslim. It does not have to be a Muslim cause. We need to go to places from a place of contribution, not always from a needy place of receiving help from others. So just to be involved locally. You need to be leading the cause of feeding the homeless, of public education, poverty, public education, all of these things. Local politics, government's a very small part of it. And then, inshallah, things will fall into place after that.
And the second part, I think, was, and this is what Imam Sohaib was, when we talked to him, it's like, just trust us. Like, I think people need to trust you guys in those positions. Because I think people are trying to be experts, and you see some on social media and you just want to be haters and negative. And that's really not productive.
It is so easy for people to write everything off, man. And that's, look, it
evades responsibility too.
No husn al-dhan, no good assumption. We immediately go to a place of assuming insincerity in people.
And it evades responsibility. You don't have to be responsible anymore. If you can write something up, you can tell yourself, I don't have to do this, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing. If you're not offering any solution to anything, and you're just constantly pointing out the problems with everyone else's efforts, then you're not doing any service either. So people need to understand this. Now, when he says just trust us, we should be criticized. We should be advised. Criticism should come secondary to advice. Advice, nasiha, comes first, and you can reach people usually, somehow to advise them. And even when you criticize them in a way that they would heed your criticism, that they would think about what you're saying, not in a way that you would alienate them further from the community. We have a lot of activists, and I hope people listen to this message, and instead of trying to assign names to it, but I'll tell you what, you have a lot of good, sincere Muslims that are in the field of activism, that are going into that are in such uncomfortable spaces and having to do things at times where they're going to make mistakes. Do not write off their sincerity. Don't alienate them. We need to help them in this craziness of Trumpistan that we're in right now, all right? Like, we need to help them see things that are perhaps in their blind spots, because it's hard for them. But if you just attack people and lash out at them, and you're not doing anything to help the causes, the legitimate causes that they're a part of, then they're not going to listen to you. So we lose them. We lose all the people that are following them. We hurt our community. The only thing we get out of that is that people The people will prop up our egos and like, oh, you told her, oh, you told him, like, yeah, alhamdulillah, you're speaking the haqq. Well, good for you. You just alienated a very prominent activist, or not even a prominent activist, someone that's not prominent at all, and everyone that follows that activist. And all the observers that watched you took from that conservative Muslims are jerks, right? They're tone-deaf jerks, which only feeds that problem. The Prophet ﷺ, there's one thing you could never accuse the Prophet ﷺ of, by the way, amongst the other things. And notice, they accused him of being a sorcerer. They accused him of being a liar. They accused him of being a madman. They accused him of being a magician. Did anyone accuse the Prophet ﷺ of being a hypocrite?
No.
No. His integrity was unquestionable. His love for the people, his service to the people, you can't negate that. You can question his message. You're not going to negate all the times the Prophet ﷺ stood with the poor, stood with those who are in need, and stood with the oppressed. So he's Sadiq Amin. You can't take that away. All you can do is say that he's lost it now, but you can't call him a hypocrite, and you can't say he's an opportunist, because clearly he has a track record that demonstrates otherwise.
Sure. Sheikh Omar, Jazakallah khair for coming on. We've been trying to get you on for a while, and glad we were able to make this happen. For our listeners, is there anything you've got coming up in the next several months that you want anyone to be aware of? I know you've got Yaqeen is still kind of going. They got the website YaqeenInstitute.org, right? Yeah. Anywhere else people can kind of find out more about what you're working on?
No, I don't want you to follow me or find out what I'm working on. Just make dua for me and make dua for everybody else that's involved, and ask Allah to keep us sincere and guided.
He's being humble. Follow him on Facebook, guys.
Yeah.
No, I'm actually being for real. Like, we need du'as. Instead of like seriously, man, like, when people write praise or say something like, you're awesome, you're great, that doesn't do anything except for harm the nafs. But when you see someone and you say Jazakallahu khairan, or may Allah keep you sincere, may Allah guide you, may Allah protect you, may Allah protect your family, make dua for people, to be guided and to be protected and to be sincere first and foremost, inshallah, for everyone, not just for me, but for everyone, inshallah.
Well, yeah, I'm sure I speak for the Sheikh Amir and Sim. I think you answered a lot of our questions that we had. I was wondering, how are you so freaking nice all the time?
Was I nice? And
you were nice, but I'm you're younger than me. Like, we grew up in America. We're kind of like jerks. It's kind of like a man thing. You know what I mean?
He was talking about when you were at ISNA and you're like tired and people are constantly stopping you and you're constantly talking to everybody. You're answering their questions.
Yeah, 10-minute walk to a bazaar should takes an hour for this guy.
And he's like, he says, we said mashallah, but he's like, what's wrong with this guy? He's so nice. Like, what do you know what's wrong with him? He's a nice guy.
Did you walk around with one of those sunglasses?
I'm 6'5", dude. I can't hide from anybody. That's the problem.
Yeah, the mustache with the nose.
I'm 6'5", and I always wear a kufi. So I can't get away from people. But no, man, it's just New Orleans, man. You guys are from
Chicago.
The
Southern hospitality.
It's New Orleans,
that's right.
If you've been in New Orleans, you totally get it.
Okay.
No doubt. Okay, well, for our listeners out there, if you have any questions or comments, you can email us at themadmamluks@gmail.com. You can like our Facebook page, follow us on Twitter. We're also on Instagram.
We're not humble, so please follow us on Facebook.
Follow us. Give us a 5-star review, even if our podcast sucks. And we're also on Podcast Addict for you Android folks. So for our special guest, Sheikh Omar Suleiman, and my co-hosts, Sheikh Amir Saeed Sim, this is Mahin signing off for the Mad Mamluks. Assalamu alaikum.